Welcome back.
Possible to merge our two societies slowly by introducing this type of system which I described on page 18 in my booklet, and I hope some of you picked up the diagram on the table, which is called subversion process. By mistake it was entitled disinformation process, which is similar, of course. This is what happens. I reproduce this diagram graphically in a condensed abstract form. I do it for simplicity. The reality looks, of course, more complex. But this is the basics. You can write diagrams like this for yourself. All you have to do is to put what you see in chronological order. That's all. I put it this way, and I explain it. What I was learning from the Soviet instructors for 6 years in Moscow. Open society is yours. Closed is mine. We try to turn you into closed one to merge, right? They don't make any secrets about it. And believe me, some of your elitist groups do the same. They also are talking about interdependent world economy, one world government. If you think I'm crazy, go to library, subscribe to a magazine which is called Foreign Affairs, published by Council on Foreign Relations. Or read the magazine which is entitled Trialogue, published by Trilateral Commission. Read the books by Brzezinski. They openly, cynically admit that yes, their goal is interdependent, one global village, as Carl Sagan calls it. And of course, they don't explain you that probably millions, billions of people wouldn't mind to live in one world system if it were your system. Believe me, 270 Russians would mind to live in a free market capitalist system and have a form of government which is a republic like yours. Sure, they would like to do that. But the trick is, they want one global village, which is ruled by benevolent bureaucrats and scientists, doctors, Kissinger, Jane Fonda, Daniel Ellsberg, maybe Walter Mondale. They will redistribute the wealth by force, naturally. They will legislate equality and all other people. This is the trick. How to do it? Simple. We don't have to infiltrate agents into your governmental offices, and it is impossible. But we can infiltrate ideas into your minds through your media, through your educational system, through entertainment industry, through music even. Beatles, Schmittles, whoever. We, drop by drop, put poison into your mind. On this diagram, I select only one such idea, which is called egalitarianism. It is not new. It has not been invented by Russians, communists, or KGB. It is, as always, mankind itself. No, not as always mankind itself. Actually, the formulation of this egalitarian idea goes all the way back, I would say, French Revolution, when a group of intellectuals, who call themselves Illuminati, decided that it is easier to control society if I convince all of you that you are equal. Meanwhile, I hope you realize that people are unequal. They never were equal. And God forbid they'll even ever be. Some people are always tall, curly, and dumb, others are short, bald, and smart. There is nothing like equality. If we presume that we are created by God, if God is creator of such complexity as universe, probably it wouldn't be a big deal for God to create us all equal, like ball bearings in the cactus, or like ants, or cockroaches, or fishes. No! These little forms of life are equal. Mankind is not. Never was. Even fingerprints are different. Ask your policeman. Billions of people populate this planet. No two identical fingerprints. Isn't it interesting? Each one is unequal and unique. And the Illuminati understood it perfectly well. They were intelligent people. Why they invented this nonsense? Simple, to control. It is easier to control people when they are equal and demand equal things. It is impossible to control society if you remain unequal and independently minded. Simple. What egalitarianism does is not just semantic inaccuracy. Listen carefully what it does to you. Egalitarianism, if it is legalized, legislated, and enforced by law in your country, creates false expectations and false perceptions of reality. We know people are unequal, but by law, I must be equal. For equal job, equal pay, right? Why? I say no, it is nonsense. And many of you will disagree with me, especially unionized work. What do you mean, Mr. Sean? It's a law of our country. For equal pay for equal job. Why? Imagine yourself. You do create these things, podiums, all right? You're whistling, you are very happy. You are paid $5 an hour. Fine. You're very happy. Sun is shining. The moment you realize that the same podium is created by next door unionized neighbor for $12 an hour, what do you feel? Huh? I'm happy, right? Have you ever heard about any American who wants to be equal with someone who has one popsicle less? No, you want to be equal with someone who has more, naturally. Now, please explain to a dumb Russian like me, what is behind the equality in the minds of million people? What is the motivation, sentiment? What is the driving force of equality? Huh? What? Greed, envy and greed. Something that in any civilization, through the history of mankind, in any holy scripture, is described as destructive side of human nature. Don't be greedy. Don't envy. If you're happy with $5, be happy. You don't need 12. No, we want to be equal. All right? Greed is the main negative side of human nature. Greed, ignorance, fear, egocentrism, all these things are the breeding ground for communist ideas. Greed. 6,000 years ago, Moses came down from the mountain and says, "Thou shalt not desire property of thy unionized neighbor." Huh? No? Well, 2,000 years ago, basically same message from Jesus Christ. Don't be greedy. You're a temporary tenant on this planet. You cannot take all these goodies to wherever you go. All right? Now we want to be 20 cents equal. And if we're not paid this 20 cents an hour more, we walk out to strike. If I'm a nurse, I leave patients to die for lousy 20 cents an hour more. If I'm an electrician in New York City, like it happened 3 years ago, for lousy 30 cents an hour more, I leave city without power, 5 kids frozen to death. Poor children, of course, because rich kids don't freeze us, you know. For lousy 50 cents an hour more, okay, $1 more. If I'm a truck driver, I shoot another truck driver because he wants to work and I want to bum around. I'm on strike. Are you that cruel? Are you that broke? Do you that desperately in need of 20 cents an hour more? In a super productive nation like yours, you're getting obsessed about these trifles. You're the most generous nation on earth. For the 200 years of your history, you're always helping other people. But this is what's screwing up your minds. Égalité, fraternité, et liberté. False ideas, artificially created, artificially, forcefully introduced by your media, by your public education school. KGB has only to encourage this, that's all. They're not after your secrets, they're after your minds.
Wow. They're not after your secrets, they're after your minds. And isn't that the truth? Welcome back, you spazzes, you warriors of truth. That was little Yuri Bezmanov, if you can't tell. And if you haven't checked out Yuri Bezmanov, I highly suggest that you go on a deep dive. And it's time if you have not. And just check out all of the information for yourself. Don't let other people be the judge for you. You get to be your own judge. Maybe you don't believe what Yuri was saying. Maybe you think he was doing some type of spy work by even saying all this stuff. No matter what you believe, at least go check out the work. Check out what he was saying, and then use your own mind to reference what's going on, just to have an idea of what he may be talking about, and if it's accurate in your opinion or in your analytical ability. Use your best scientific method, whatever you have it. But as far as all the arrows pointing towards him being right, there's many. There are many. And why wouldn't someone want you to buy into all the things that are going to make you capitulate your own demise, to your own demise? Let's get back to that. But first, I want to talk about some of these things here and what Yuri was talking about. So Yuri Bezmanov was a self-proclaimed former high-ranking KGB agent. He was a bit of a diplomat of sorts, or at least it seems the face of his role with the KGB was as a subversive diplomat, someone to get people to become agreeable when they visited the USSR, the Soviet Russia. He introduced to us the 4 stages of ideological subversion, and he claimed that the KGB came up with this methodology, and I'm not even sure on that. I'm not sure how we would even prove that, right? And one important note would be just for me to say maybe these are methods that have been used for ages, and the Russians just happened to put it to paper and actually start to write this process down, which, if so, and Yuri was taught these methods, would allow him to start to disseminate this information that he had been exposed to. And it's curious because I don't recall off the top of my head of him mentioning any other agents who were involved in the process. But I'd be very interested to find out who was involved in the process. I mean, we all know Edward Bernays was involved with creating modern forms of, you could say, technique and methodology for mass propaganda and mass, essentially what equates to mass psychological operations via propaganda. Like if you didn't know, well, it was Edward Bernays' nephew who was the origin CEO of Netflix. So when you're watching an app, an organization like Netflix, it's a good idea to keep these things in mind, especially when you're watching documentaries. And I didn't know this stuff when I first started watching Netflix, I think, which was about 2007 or so. And I quite enjoyed getting those DVDs in the mail. But as I started, I was one of the early streamers because I didn't want to, and I couldn't afford how much they were charging for cable. So I was an early streamer with Hulu and Netflix. And for many years, got away with what? It was like $10 for one, $10 for the other. So I was paying like $20 a month, and I could watch virtually the same things as everyone else. Um, but anyways, if you would watch the documentaries on Netflix, they push people in a certain direction, and you can argue against that now because I have watched what they've done, and they've tried to add what would seem to be counter narratives and stuff like that. But if you're kind of seeing from my lens and seeing from the lens of people who have been watching for a long time and know what to look for as far as the ideological subversions, and even I guess you could say the like emotional and mental subversions, the scientific, even the scientific subversions, because what we're seeing now goes beyond just a baseline ideology. The ideology captures the minds of people into scientism as well. The follow the science people who would take a double-blind study and run with that for until the end of the universe, even though that may not be a silver bullet. It's for something scientific, and it may be quite useful in a mountain of evidence, but we should not take one thing and cherry pick and run with that to the ends of Earth. Nor should we take anecdotal accounts as being the only thing that matters, nor should we dismiss them. So when you have documentaries like what was the one recently that had to do with the vegan athletes? The name of it is slipping my mind right now, but some of you know what I'm talking about. And they're taking these athletes, some of them who have not been vegans their whole lives, and people who have transferred over to becoming vegan, or what would we say, converted over. And I'm not bashing anyone that wants to be a vegan. If you want to be a vegan, by all means, that's great. But if you want to force the rest of the world to be vegans with you, then you're an asshole. And the reason you're an asshole is because this is how humanity got here. And enough about that. We'll get back to that. But you should be careful on Netflix if you're following those documentaries, because they're not entirely truthful. A lot of them have been quote-unquote debunked in terms of their framing and the information that they're sharing and how they're misframing some of the things that they're doing. And some of it is blatantly lies, which is really unfortunate to see. and they've gotten better at that. They've gotten better at being very kind of tedious and having these documentaries that are fairly delicate but still misleading at the end of the day. So they've gotten more effective with their propaganda. And I'm not saying it's all the worst propaganda in the world, but it all adds up, that's for sure. So, anyways, back to Edward Bernays. Um, and the reason why that matters with what I'm saying to the KGB is because it's important, I think, to look at all the people involved in these processes, what their aims might have been, what their intentions were, and what they were actually trying to do. And if they were, what would we say, righteous people, moral people, honest people. It's one of the things that Yuri talks about a lot is demoralization. And from that, what I've picked up is the process of moralization, which is showing people a way that holds more truth, more honesty, more nobility, and to have pride in the truth and trying to find the truth. So let's go over 4 stages of ideological subversion as far as Yuri laid them out to us. The demoralization phase is over at least 1 generation, maybe 2 generations. In the United States, as far as I can tell, it's been going on since at least the 60s. So that's at least for 2 generations now, going on to 3 generations. So not only have there been the boomers, Gen X, and now the millennials, but we're moving into Gen Z now. So that would be the 4th. We're moving into the 4th generation of this. And this has been going on through, and Devin Stack on Black Pill does a really good job at covering all the cinema, all the movie stuff, and all the evolution of the propaganda in Hollywood and so forth, in the entertainment industry. And I don't have anyone yet who does it in video games, but I can say that there is some really heavy propaganda in the video games that I'm becoming more aware of, especially as I think back on it. One game right now that I'd say people should check out as far as this type of propaganda would be, what was it, Cyberpunk 2077? I was playing that a little bit and kind of going through it, and there's all kinds of notes that hint towards these wars that happen between corporations and farmers that led to where they are now, which would be what, almost 50 years in the future. And you're in a mega city in the game. So you're in one of these mega cities, and different levels, the higher up you go in these mega cities, the wealthier people are and the more access to things they have. And there's just all kinds of predictive programming things. And I'm sure you guys have seen stuff like this somewhere along the way. Once you understand what predictive programming is, you kind of like see it everywhere, but that ends up falling to some biases as well. It's like frequency bias or something like that. If you're aware of something, you obviously become more likely to notice it. So there's a little bit of a trap in there with deconstructing that I warn people about. And that trap becomes, if you're trying to see something, you're going to see it. So sometimes you might be a little overly obsessive in what you're trying to see. So everything, it can make people super neurotic and even psychotic to a degree. It will push you into like a psychosis if you allow it to, if you deconstruct enough without reconstructing healthy frames. So I just want to warn people of that, because I've seen a lot of people deconstruct to the point where they go virtually kooky, and it's not fun to watch. It's a quite alarming process, and these people can alienate themselves quite rapidly. And this is very heavy information, so I understand why. But it's super important that we try to remain healthy in this understanding of what's going on and everywhere, and reporting on it. So the demoralization phase is to educate an entire generation in Marxist ideology. And we've seen that. We've seen the Marxist ideology run throughout our institutions and throughout our government organizations and so forth, private industries as well. We've seen this happen to the point where maybe the government can use plausible deniabilities because they're hiring third parties or private parties to do their bidding, and those private parties, you could debate or argue that maybe using that plausible deniability would be, oh, we didn't know they were into these types of things, or they did, or they had connections to those types of things, something like that. But the truth is it's a fairly common practice from what I can tell, and I'll do some other videos at some point, and we'll connect some of those dots and go over some of those things to make sure they make sense and that we're not just reaching all over the place, because that's again one of those things you don't want to get caught up in is just reaching everywhere you go. It's good to be able to back up some of the things that you're doing with some pretty solid evidence, so it makes sense. Another guy who's been doing that, if you guys ever want to check him out, is James Corbett, the Corbett Report. I think he's fully off of YouTube now. I'm not sure if any of this stuff will get us taken off. Maybe it will at some point. Maybe it won't. I don't feel like we're saying anything that's bad, but in these Marxist subversions, anything can be taken as offensive. I just went to turn on a G. Edward Griffin video on the Yuri Bezmanov channel earlier today, and today is October 16th. It's a Saturday, 2021. Just for note. And that content was labeled potentially offensive, and I noticed it wasn't shareable, so I don't know what that was about. Someone did find a shareable version of that video. If I can think of it by the time I upload this, I'll add it for you guys to the info section. Anyways, demoralization phase. So it's weird, and I'll try not to get too deep into my opinions on these things, but it seems like the demoralization phase has gone over several times, like I've said, through several of our generations, and it's kind of been like pulsing its way through our general dialectic in the modern world. We have a destabilization phase: economy, foreign relations, and defensive systems. We seem to be quite heavily in that destabilization as well as that crisis phase. Felix Rex on his channel, which I think he's on YouTube, but I saw it on BitChute, and I haven't watched all the stuff on BitChute, so I'm pretty sure it's probably a little bit spicier on BitChute and Odyssey. But he was saying that he believes that we're in a destabilization crisis phase kind of simultaneously, which I can't argue against that. We are seeing the economy, what essentially is collapsing. If you I'll think of his name, but there's an economist that I think, George Gammon, is doing a really great job at covering a lot of this stuff, and he's an excellent teacher. So he could tell you exactly what's happening in the economy, piece by piece. Foreign relations. So we're seeing, right now we're seeing unions of all the Asian countries, all the powerhouse Asian countries coming together for energy deals. And the U.S. is falling out of some of those deals, and Europe they're still in some of the deals, but it's just the U.S. and Europe isn't as strong as it was before with the energy sector and our energy deals. And as far as the defense systems go, you can see what happened in Afghanistan. It looks like that we gave up billions of dollars worth of equipment to the Afghans and these what are called terror agencies over there. I don't know any of those people. I'm not saying they aren't. I don't know all the details of some of those situations. So I have to kind of take their word that some of those people do, want people over here gone for whatever reason. It's really, really, it's a difficult world now. And I'm sure that's, if anyone's watching this, that's why you're here, is because it's we're trying to make sense of all this stuff, and we don't want to be thrown in these bins with these people who are actually going around killing people, committing atrocious acts and stuff like that. So really strange days we got. The crisis is a violent change of power, structure, and economy. Um, when he uses the word or the term violent here, a lot of times people, when they think of violence, they think of physical violence. We could outline forms of mental and emotional violence. So to say that there's a violent change of power, if we had to use that term, we might be able to frame it as all these mental manipulations and emotional manipulations. I mean, it looks like the election is questionable as far as what we've covered, and you can go on our website, and we kind of compiled evidence through the elections to show some sketchy happenings as to what was going on. So we intentionally did that because we wanted to have reference to wherever this whole thing ended up, and it's almost a year later now. We had a network of us that were removed from Facebook, and not given any reason. I wasn't given any reason. I believe that Facebook itself blocked my IP address for whatever reason. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of moves being made by the private institutions and corporations, as well as the government agencies, institutions, and organizations. And we're seeing a mass censorship that we've never seen before. So you could say that the violent change of power is somewhere involved in some of that censorship. The structure of how we allow people to be involved in these processes, and the freedom that's involved, especially freedom of travel, stuff like that, freedom of finance, and just the ability to live, do business, and live your life. Normalization, normalize, normal. Let's try this. Normalization. I think I got it right the first time. I wanted to slow it down and break it down, but that's not an easy word to break down. Normalization. Anywho, it's a period of stability. It's where you have things happening, and you convince people that this is normal now. This is how things are going to be. This is totally normal. This is how things are supposed to be. And right now, it's hard to say what is being normalized other than what we can see. And we can see these neo-Marxist movements driven by the Maosheviks on all fronts towards at least the American people. I do see other Western cultures like Australia. I think I talked about this last video. Europe, Canada, all dealing with the same types of issues. The race issues, claims of racism, which is a made-up term by the Trotskyites, as we all know, well, as the people who know, and using words like transphobic and stuff like that. I mean, you could call anyone phobic of anything if you want, and you can put a bunch of creative frames on it for how people are phobic of something, therefore it makes them dangerous. It's a really slippery slope as far as things go, and it aims to make people your enemy, or it aims to create a pretense of tension that makes you just a bad guy by default, not just another human being, but just a bad person, which that begets more of that, and that goes back and forth. If you think someone's a bad person, if you make someone an enemy, you just made them your enemy, therefore you're their enemy. That's how that logic works. I always warn people against that. I did a lot of work in security and stuff through the years, and I've seen a lot of confrontations, and I would just always warn people about making someone your enemy. Like, well, why would you want to do that? Especially right away if you don't know the person. It takes a long time to get to know people. I tell people that all the time. So this was all Yuri stuff came out to my knowledge in around 1984, which is quite a coincidence itself. Uh, but yeah, 83, 84 is when all this stuff, him teaching courses, him doing this interview with G. Edward Griffin, and all him just kind of disseminating all this insider information out, and here we are, what, almost 40 years later, and it's more relevant than ever. It seems, the meme is right. The meme is Yuri Bezmanov was right. Yuri says the highest art of warfare is not to fight at all, but to subvert anything of value in the country of your enemy until such time that the perception of reality of your enemy is screwed up to such an extent that he does not perceive you as an enemy. The Maosheviks have done a wonderful job of this. TikTok is a great example. So TikTok, yeah, sure, it's owned by someone who's Chinese or a Chinese company, so you can't say it's the CCP. But if you know how owning companies works in China, it's not the most fair thing. It's still a communist country. So all this collection of data, manipulation of attention, attention spans, kind of the breaking of the psyche and the ability for people to have healthy relationships, all that stuff, it's all wrapped up in there. And it's not just the CCP. There's other nations that are doing this, and that's why I call them the Maosheviks once again, instead of like the Maoists or just the neo-communists, which those are appropriate terms at certain times. But when you're referring to this kind of overarching monolith of globalists, they're just they're mixed up in there with their own agenda as well. So I'm not anti-China by any means, just to make that clear. But communism historically has been a pretty big problem, and they are a communist regime quite openly. And the most powerful one in the world. Actually, we could go as far as to say they're the most powerful communist organization in human history, which makes them absolutely terrifying from the standpoint of a humanitarian who doesn't want to see lots of people die. Because the history of communism and capitalism to some degree, but not in the same way. There's an argument in there where people will be like, "Well, capitalism has killed lots of people." And it's like, it's quite a different thing, and we can get into that. I'd love to debate that with someone at some point, or I'd love to get two people to debate that as well on here with us at some point. And if any of you have any suggestions for who, I'd be glad to hear it. I don't really like giving communism or communists platforms, but and you can call that bias all you want. That's just my honest take. But I'm okay with a healthy debate, and if anything else comes from it that's useful, then so be it. The rest of that quote goes, so he talks about the reality your enemy is screwed up to an extent that he does not perceive you as an enemy. You can take your enemy without a single shot being fired. So that's the subversion process. And I think if any of you have had, let's say, personal relationships that have been decimated or drastically affected in a negative way in the past year and a half, or actually, I'll even go back to 2016, or since the 2016 elections with Trump becoming president, if you have had any relationship issues. Now, I'd say that subversion it goes back further than just this recent process, and there's all kinds of different little subversions going on all the time, and we can start to build evidence with this with the media, some of the dishonest things that they say, and even with Trump and co and his regime and some of the dishonest things they say too, because it seems like all these people enjoy lying, and if they don't enjoy it, they make quite a habit of it. Attempting to reason with demoralized people. NPCs, right? Because a demoralized person is basically an NPC. It's someone who's highly programmed to only say what they're programmed to say. They're not in a space where they're willing to, and I think almost everyone's been there at some point. Like they've gotten demoralized to a point and then just spouted some shit and kind of said it and then thought to themselves, maybe they're talking to someone who's either smarter or giving off points that they haven't considered before, and you said something and you're like, do I really believe that? Someone points out how dumb it is or something, and you're like, huh. Makes you go think about it. I think anyone with a brain, at least, has considered the fact that they could be wrong about something, and when someone makes a fair enough point. Attempting to reason with the demoralized people. They are contaminated, Yuri says. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their minds, even if you expose them to authentic information. Even if you prove that white is white and black is black, you still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. So with this is actually going a lot longer than I thought it would. But with this, you probably have met someone who is in this state of being, whether it be about gender, whether it be about any inequalities, whether it be about science or scientific method or scientism, which is the trust the experts. Most people have come across something like this at some point, where someone's so demoralized, and this doesn't, some people are like, oh, it's the liberals are all infected, and it's like, hey man, I've seen plenty of self-proclaimed conservatives who usually aren't that conservative making demoralized arguments as well, and usually ends up in the justification of a whole bunch of horrible shit. So Yuri's name right here, over that side, over that boop, over the black is beautiful, was he changed it to Thomas Schumann when he was over here teaching, I believe, as a professor. It says, black is beautiful, communism is not. You think that I am crazy? Please ask Mexicans. Have you ever heard of any smart Mexicans sneaking across the border into Cuba, Nicaragua, or the USSR? That's pretty funny. Boat people never swim to Red China for equality and justice. Black African brothers are not running from South Africa to that. Is there more of that? Nope, that cuts off right there. You get the idea. And it's a pretty funny point. I mean, it's true. I'm sure people do, and especially now, are going to move to plenty of other places. But there's kind of no place to go that has freedom now. U.S. is the last bastion, and that's why the last kind of confrontation has to be here. And that's what it looks like there's a build up to, and that's why you see people talking about, civil unrest the way they are, all that stuff. And the Maosheviks seem to want to push that right to the edge, because the best way to capitalize off of chaos is to create more of it, and that destabilization process, and then that way you can kind of do what you want with people as they're demoralized, confused, so forth, get them to agree to all kinds of crazy shit they never would have agreed to otherwise under a free nation. And we're the only one that's been able to sustain this level of freedom for this long. But as you can see, the past 100 years, it's been under attack quite a bit. He says over here, you see the useful idiots. I call them the useful midwits now because there are quite a few useful midwits, which means they're not all that dumb, but they're very useful in terms of spitting out rhetoric that is not their own. That's just a program. The leftists who are idealistically believing in the beauty of Soviet, socialist, or communist, or whatever system, when they get disillusioned, they become the worst enemies. That's why my KGB instructors specifically made a point never bother with leftists. Forget about these political prostitutes. You're leftists in the United States, all these professors and these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion, only to destabilize a nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they see that Marxist-Leninist has come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power, that will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. And so nowadays, you could see, say, they're not going to be lined up against the wall and shot. They're just going to be censored. They're just going to be, they're just going to have their finances messed with, or whatever it is. They're just going to be blackballed, blacklisted. We see lists coming out. So if people are for all this stuff and then they realize that they've been bamboozled and that they're, not only are they not better off, but the world is not better off, and that we're all in these worse places where our money's being wasted and used against us. And like blatantly, we see this stuff daily. You know, if you guys go find the True Spasm Media Instagram, report on all this stuff. I try to keep it original on everything. So the Twitter, and this takes a lot of work, and this is what I don't think people realize. The Twitter, the Instagram, and this YouTube are all unique. I don't overlap a lot. We don't overlap a lot. So a lot of the information, you don't have that. You get a lot of people just putting the same thing everywhere. But I'll share these through the Twitter sometimes and stuff. But you're getting original content everywhere that you go. Whoops, sorry there, guys. All right, well, let's listen to a little bit of this and we'll close this out. Oop, there it is. There's Yuri. Because I'm going to go lift some weights, be great.
With reality, they create
Keep building
and
myself.
productivity goes down. Unproductive nation creates
community,
inflation, unemployment, recession, and many
family,
other unpleasant
friends.
Of course, if government prints more money, that's another contributing factor for inflation. Economical problems lead to social unrest, instability, and radicalism naturally because people become impatient. They want radical solutions.
We're going to build our local
Radicalism
stuff.
leads to power
That's
struggle.
the key.
Power struggle leads to replacement of the social political structure through revolution, civil war, or invasion, and simply being absorbed by a neighboring state, like it happens in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The result, if that pattern goes according to communist plan, is always the same: closed society. Just the opposite. Carbon copy of my society. Now we can merge. This is what any nation can do to itself. This is what you can see on your televisions. This is what you never see on your televisions. On the other side of the diagram, 4 stages of subversion. Why? So that you will never stop going from open to closed society. Even if you change your mind halfway, even if you realize that equality is not important, no, we force you all the way down. How? First stage, demoralization, 20 years. Enough number of years to educate one generation of your students exposed to ideas of your enemy. Second stage, destabilization, 5 years. Third stage, crisis, change of the political structure. And the last one, normalization. That lasts forever. Lifetime of your children, grandchildren, and grandchildren. And that's it. And if you read this diagram carefully, if you're not that stingy to buy my booklet for $5, you can realize that media occupies only one speck Only one line in this diagram. They are being controlled by the big money. They are following the order. They are being paid for what they are doing, not because they have done what. Some of them are ignorant, yes, but not all of them. No. But if you misbehave in a network like ABC, you will be out in 2 days. If they describe what I'm saying to you in positive terms, they will lose their job. This is why they're lying to you. This is why they call you democracy, whereby you are knowing perfectly well that you are a republic. This is why they invent all kind of garbage, such as just redistribution of wealth, forgetting that your president, Abraham Lincoln, said you cannot make poor people happy by robbing the rich, but you can make them happy by allowing them to work and enjoy fruits of their labor. Don't tax them to death, they'll be happy. Don't patronize blacks by giving them welfare checks. Respect them by giving them jobs, by feeling confident, constructive, accentuate the positive. You remember that song? These are interrelated things. Please believe me, these things do not happen by themselves. Nothing happens by themselves except cold or some other unpleasant things. Political things or social political changes happen in society only if they are planned and intended to happen. This is what I'm trying to explain. Part of your problem is that you are being manipulated unknowingly. And some of your media cooperates willingly or otherwise with subversion. This is basically description of the problem. As you see, it took me almost 90 minutes to describe it. And I don't want you to go home depressed. I want you to know the solution. And it is so simple, you wouldn't believe it. It takes only seconds to explain. Have patience. Now we'll go home. Where is the solution? Simple, unscientific. It doesn't worth $8 million. It costs only $5. You know what is the solution? If you don't want to be demoralized by the subversion, all you have to do is to stay moral. That's all. Don't change. Don't rush to social progress. Bring prayer back to school. Don't rush after.
That's
Try
it,
to
guys.
understand that the demoralization, the most heavy, the most long process, which is incorporated in subversion, may become irreversible once you educate majority of your young people. They grow up firmly believing that Ronald Reagan is responsible to clean environment, and no, he's not responsible to keep.
What he's saying, I just think that's just so important. He's saying that you may be able to moralize people, from demoralization to moralization, and that in itself might be irreversible, and that is where we're going to end up, because I think that's the key, is moralize each other, be good, love one another, bond, take care of each other. You're going to go through hard times, you're going to disagree about things, sometimes you're going to not get along with someone for days, months, years, but forgive them, try to come together, and always move forward. Keep building. Take care, everyone. Like, subscribe, share.